So, after several years, we're back in vanilla Kerbal Space Program. Kerbal Space Program is one of those games that you don't know is the best game until you do. Well, top 3. It's very good. It's also quite old now, and thus perfect for this channel. So here we are at the moon, sitting pretty at 11 frames per second. Much like the real moon, this moon is teeming with hydrogen and oxygen, waiting to be mined. Well, I don't know if the real moon has that, but this one does, and I decided I was going to have it. You see, there are a lot of practical reasons for getting your fuel from the moon. I don't know what they are, but whatever. I'm obsessive compulsive, so once I heard you could do it, I was going to do it. You see, OCD kind of changes your perspective on goals. I once saw a suggestion that you could hit every biome on the moon just by making a vehicle and driving to them. I do not recommend this. You see, at the point of the game that this would be useful, this is about the best vehicle I could cobble together. But I did it. It took me 80 hours. That's longer than most Final Fantasy playthroughs. But I did it. So when I decided I was going to mine on the moon, it was going to be all in. I was going to build a big old base, have a big old ship that could transfer fuel back and forth. The best way to do this would be to take a bunch of separate base pieces on wheels and clip them all together on the moon. After all, I saw a video of it being done, therefore I could do it. Despite my hubris, however, I actually did manage to land all the vehicles I needed on the moon. Mostly on the first try, too. See this? Totally meant to do that. This one, I actually did mean to do. You have no idea how surprised I was that this worked on the first try. Of course, sending up all 4 of these vehicles with one launch vehicle wasn't the first plan I had. It was merely a spontaneous thought while planning the rocket. Spontaneous thoughts are dangerous for someone with OCD, but sometimes it pays off. Except, it didn't. You see, KSP has something called physics easing. It kicks in on vehicles of a certain size. I think the specific criteria is 1,000 parts. I don't know that for a fact, but it seems to be. What this does is allow the game to run at above 1 frame per second on huge builds, most of the time. Here's an example of gratuitous staging and also an excuse to show this clip from another mission where this was literally the only interesting that happened. Physics easing does exactly what you'd think it does, by which I mean I'm not entirely sure what it does, other than make the game run better. Unless you're on the ground. You see, as much as I went on my way to keep the individual base part counts down, once the total count slipped above 1,000, the next time I swapped to the base, this would happen. It's fun to watch, but not exactly useful. I went through the forums, checked more mods, couldn't find anything to turn off the physics easing. Also, mods in KSP are fair weather friends. Nothing like a surprise update to break all your mods and thus your save file. Plus I wanted to do this vanilla. I don't remember why I decided that, but once I did, I was going to stick to it. Sadly, I had to bite the bullet. Whatever I did, my best bet was to make a single ship to do everything. That meant some compromises. No, just kidding. Compromise was never an option. If I was going to start over from scratch, whatever I made had to be both below the 1,000 part count and be better than what I had previously planned. It had to hold more than the previously planned transfer vehicle, and it had to mine faster than the entire planned facility would. And it does. Here she is. This behemoth has about 700 parts and holds an abjectly insane amount of fuel. With 32 miners and 4 refiners, it takes 11 game days to fill. It can run off of fuel cells at night at about 90% efficiency. And when full, it can do something I never planned for the previous base to do. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Don't worry, I hate cliffhangers as much as anyone, so I won't let it drag on too much. First, let's talk about how we got it here. At first, I planned to do what I always do when I have some weirdly shaped object I need to get into space. See, bolting a bunch of rockets onto something and just brute forcing it into space isn't something I like to do. It's something I love to do. You do still need to worry about part count, however. The problem is that almost everything you use to bolt things to other things leave bits behind when you stage them. That includes struts, which leave the little nubs behind. They weigh nothing, but they do still count towards parts. Almost all decouplers do this as well, with one exception. The white and purple ring decouplers completely detach themselves. That means if you can attach scaffolding around a payload and have that scaffolding only attached to the payload with that type of decoupler, there are no legacy bits left on your vehicle once you stage the scaffolding. It also means you can put all those space flighty, control-y stuff on the scaffolding and use it to balance the launch vehicle. It's also much, much heavier, but that's fine by me because it justifies making ridiculous rockets. Once you're done, you can either just leave the debris in space or delete it. Believe me, I'd leave it there, but it slows down the game, so I delete it. Well, now that I've gone through all that, I'll get to the point. I didn't do that. All the staging actually fit real nicely on the bottom of the engine of the tanker using only the purple decouplers. There are exactly 3.6 million struts in this launch construction, but they're all between the boosters, so once they're staged, they're gone. I'm sure you don't want to watch the whole 37-minute video of the launch, especially since I'm an idiot and did that at night, so we'll just show the interesting bits. Like this first staging. Yeah. That's staging. And the second staging. Much like the 4 Moonstruck lander majig, this looks like a disaster, but is actually working exactly as intended, except with explosions. But don't worry, they're good explosions. No one important was hurt. Well, no one complained at least. As you can clearly see here at a glance, and I most definitely didn't forget and have to count them again as I wrote this script, this uses 68 nuclear engines and 4 liquid fuel oxidizer engines. Those 4 liquid fuel oxidizer engines will run out of oxidizer long before orbit, but they'll be important in a bit. Right now, not so much. Also, you'll note I didn't launch it full of fuel. It would have never gotten off the ground if I did. Luckily, it needs far less than a full tank to get to the moon. I'd like to point out that, due to pure skill, I managed to stick the transfer without an orbit. We join back up at the landing. This particular crater is the best spot equator-ish for mining, so it's our spot. This is sped up a gazillion times normal speed because it'd be painful to watch otherwise. I dumped the monopropellant that I clearly shouldn't have bothered bringing with me in the first place to make the thing slightly lighter, and actually dumped some of the fuel as well. I was concerned that the throttle wouldn't be all that responsive on the way down, and anything I could ditch to lower the weight was going overboard. Turns out my math, and by my math, I mean the math the game gave me before launch, was on point, and I was able to put her down without much of a fuss on the 68 nuclear engines. So here we are, a gigantic lunar mining rig capable of mining a decazillion liters of fuel in 11 days. Now all that is needed is some way to get it back to Kerbal orbit. Of course, 68 nuclear engines is enough to get this thing landed. It weighs just a wee bit more now that it's carrying enough fuel to jumpstart the sun. So are we going to bring in another vehicle to pick up the fuel? Well, of course not. You see, I'm a genius. Well, maybe not a genius. But I think you'll have to admit that this at least a little bit clever. Remember those 4 liquid fuel oxidizer engines? Well, I now have oxidizer again. Not much, but enough. Cue the Creative Commons music. Bringing her back to Curvin wasn't actually all that difficult, but stopping it turned out to be more of a chore than expected. You see, when you aerobrake something this large, you have to account for the amount you move the planet as you push through the atmosphere. I actually decreased the day by 12 minutes, Superman style. It took 2 long aerobraking maneuvers to get this thing into orbit. Well, actually it took 3 in one quick load. The first one didn't go so well. It all looked really epic. Naturally, I managed to biff the recording and just got a blank screen with sound, which is decidedly less epic. Anyway, that's my supertanker. It has far more fuel left than you'd think. As it gets lighter, it gets more DV out of every liter, which means that it only needs a bit of what's left to get back to the moon. Of course, it's probably not going back there anytime soon, because I'm pretty sure it'll take me quite some time to empty this thing. Also, I managed to forget which save file is the right one. I'd like to thank you for watching. I'd like to thank the 90 people subbed to the 1 or so videos I upload per year. True friends, you guys. And I'd definitely like to thank the musicians who upload music as Creative Commons. You guys rock. Till next time.